All right, good morning, beautiful people. It's a beautiful day in Milwaukee on August 27th. For those of you that are in the wave two of first day of school that started yesterday for a lot of the parochial schools, God bless you. I'm glad you made it through the summer. We are in wave three, which starts September 6th, so we still have another almost 2 weeks. But anyways, I digress. We're going to jump right into it this morning because we have kind of mainly two meaty topics to jump into. One, obviously, being a compliance topic. And then the second is I'm going to go break down Gary's market of the moment speech around the macro environment of what's going on within the U.S. economy as well as the U.S. housing inventory. And what I tried to do is make it in the most layman's terms possible so that you can understand where we are and where likely we are headed. And I use a lot of visualizations to help you break down his slides. So jumping right into it is a few office operations updates. First, I wanted to give the group a little bit of an update. We launched an idea and a concept 2 to 3 weeks ago called KWMKEoffers.com. And I'll just be real with you. Within 48 hours, we had a legal inquiry that shut us down from an external standpoint. What I learned is in the Department of Justice inquiry, we as a brokerage cannot consolidate all offers of compensation amongst the brokerage. Agents individually can, okay? However, we are consolidating information internally. We just can't be externally publicly facing. So think of it, offers of cooperative compensation, very similarly to excluded listings. There's information that we can share internally, but there's information as a brokerage that we can't share externally. So we're pivoting that slightly. And yet the method and the consolidation of information isn't quite frankly changing. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it a part of the KW Milwaukee listing network in terms of the coming soons. And a field that we have added is both cooperative compensation as well as seller concessions and or any additional notes that you might have on any listings that you want to share with the group that will be internally facing. Okay. Again, as we're learning how to navigate the legal landscape, there are certain things that we can do and certain things we can't do. And as we push the limits and envelope of being progressive within the current state of affairs, we're learning around how to navigate what that looks like. So KWMKEoffers.com is there. It's just an internal consortium of data, and that you guys will have access as we upload your coming soons and excludeds into the listing network. Cool. Second piece is there's no team meeting next week, Tuesday the 3rd, which is Tuesday post Labor Day. So just make sure that you plan accordingly, that there's no team meeting next week, the 3rd. I just want to reiterate something that we talked about last week in terms of the lessons learned in the market of the moment. And I thought it was an incredibly appropriate time to remind the group to take a little bit of the pause. And what I shared last week is the last mile problem that most businesses have. And I used an example of Amazon and how Amazon's most expensive part of their transaction is getting the item that you purchased from their warehouse to your front door. It's not the platform that you utilize to order it. It's not them sourcing the item that you desire to purchase. It is getting the item that you did purchase to your door. And I talked a little bit around how we spend lots of money on marketing and leads. We spend tons of money on technology and CRMs, and we spend money on AI and predictive analytics to score leads. And yet our last mile problem within our business is the relationship. And that oftentimes we as agents lose sight of the fact that you can spend all this money on upfront marketing in order to build your funnel. But unless you are there to capture the leads once they are in your funnel by developing that relationship is the last mile problem that we face within our industry. And I shared with you some data on some seeker shopper insights that they did across 30 different states, about 1,000 different lead aggregates in terms of some of it was physical, some of it was online, and 35% of leads were never responded to. 47% of requests were not responded to by a human. 8 hours and 17 minutes was the average time for a human to respond. 42% of agents never asked for their contact info. And 62% of people never experienced any sort of follow-up. And the premise behind the discussion last week in terms of the lessons learned in the market of the moment is all around the last mile opportunity and how we could aggregate millions of leads within our lead generation funnels. But unless we are developing the relationship, you will be disengaged or you will be disintermediated, right? And that your services aren't valued, because you got to remember 72% of the time, people only interview one person. 92% of the time they interview two. So unless you're agent unless you're agent 1 or 2, 3 through 12 don't matter. And the relationship is the last mile opportunity. And sometimes I think in the last 4 to 8 weeks, that concept has been lost a little bit on our industry in terms of the opportunity we have in terms of generating our funnel and then developing the relationships in order to convert the relationships. Because when you have the relationships, 72% of the time, they don't interview somebody else. And we have to make sure that we're remembering that right now in times of change so that we aren't losing sight of how we actually develop, cultivate, and convert our business opportunities. And so the reminder I had for the group last week, and I'm just kind of hammering this home to reseed it. If someone calls you, call them back. If someone texts you or emails you, write them back. And if you continue to build meaningful relationships, 92% of the time, you're only competing with one other person. The relationship is the key last mile problem we have in our industry. It's not how we navigate offers of cooperative compensation. It is not how we negotiate seller concessions. The challenge our industry faces is developing and maintaining, cultivating, and converting the relationships. Don't lose sight of that. So with that, a few compliance updates for the group as we start the week. First of all, I got another one of these over the weekend. These are going out to your clients, just informing, I think, almost every homeowner that there is a class action lawsuit and they have access to claim their ticket for $20.12 or whatever it might be. It's not a lot of money to each individual consumer, making sure that you guys are aware that these are going out and that you aren't caught off guard when your clients ask you about them. We've talked a lot around how we are navigating those dialogues and conversations every morning at 8:30. And there was some yesterday's conversation with Stephanie Minnick and Tony Jean Greco was a really simplified way as to how we are articulating what's going on in our industry. If you want to take back and take a look at that. Next, we hope to have this out either this week or next week, is the acknowledgement that we talked about, an agreement to practice changes. It's an addendum to our ICA. There's nothing in here that will catch you off guard. It is basically simply saying, yes, I acknowledge that I can no longer offer compensation within the MLS and so on and so forth, that are all industry practice changes. All will need to sign moving forward, and that should be forthcoming here within the next week to 2 weeks. So stay tuned there. All right, update on zip form issues. Totally aware that there were zip form issues over the weekend. Zip Forms is aware of it. This is a macro problem. It's not just a micro problem. Everyone in the industry who uses Zip Forms is facing various bug issues. Zip Forms is aware and working to fix the various issues on the platform. We have opened multiple tickets. First of all, the record fields required has been fixed. Okay. Second, to be aware of within Zip Forms is some signature boxes and miscellaneous fields have been missing. Zip Forms is aware of it and they're working to address and fix. Here's the big, making sure you're paying attention. Before you submit your offers to purchase, inspect what you expect. Inspect what you expect. Even technology can make mistakes. So we're aware of it and it's a work in progress. I discussed the KWMPOffers.com. We are still consolidating the information, but based on the current state of affairs, it has to be an internally facing platform. What you do with the information from there is your prerogative. You can read between the tea leaves on that. Awesome. All right, with that, I'm flipping it over to Sheriff Reed. Sheriff Reed, what do these guys need to know, or some good reminders about where we are?
Good morning. Good morning, Charlie, everybody. Yeah, what I'm going to cover today is just the basic putting the compensation agreement versus the offer asking for compensation on lines 543 to 547. So it's a repeat of pretty much what Steph brought up last week, but I condensed it just to be about those two choices and sort of drilling it home because those are still the most common questions that Steph and I are getting last weekend and into this week. So here's the flow chart again, and it is something that you need to pay attention to. If the listing broker agrees to pay the broker, it's not going to be an MLS. The listing broker and seller should execute a co-broke compensation agreement. That's that separate document, and they should get it to you before you write the offer. So if you're interested in writing the offer, let them know, they will give it to you. It cannot be in documents in MLS. It can only be sent directly from the listing agent to you, the buyer's agent, best to be prior writing the offer. The other situation could be the listing broker agrees to pay the buyer's broker. And it, again, not going to be an MLS, but the buyer's agent can execute the lines 543 to 547 in the offer to purchase. That is asking the seller to compensate the buyer's agent the commission, the compensation that they are getting or wanting. So the listing agent may need to consider amending the listing contract to reduce what is in the offer from what the seller has to pay in commission. So if the seller's agreed to pay 6% commission, and then the offer says that he's going to compensate the buyer's agent 2.4%, that actually adds up to 8.4. So the listing agent has a duty in that situation to do a listing amendment and reduce that amount of 2.4 that the seller, additional 2.4 that the seller needs to pay. He still only has to pay 6%.
Sheriff Reed, I just want to jump in real quick. We do have one outstanding legal item that we are waiting on from our legal team as it relates to creating crash printed language for your listing contracts that would mitigate the opportunity for you to have to amend the listing contract in these scenarios. We just have not officially gotten that fully vetted and baked yet. I hope to have that back here this week. So stay tuned for more of an update on that, likely in the next week or so, and we'll have that crash printed within our listing contracts.
That's excellent. In looking at these two choices, though, using the compensation agreement from the listing agent or using the offer to purchase line, the compensation agreement is what's preferred. That makes it very clear that the listing firm is compensating the buyer's agent firm commission compensation. So it is the smoothest way. No need to amend the listing contract, even if it's crash printed, which is good news. But it is the smoothest way and the way this was intended to work. If the listing agent does not have a compensation agreement in place or can send one over, the buyer's agent can start one. Pull out a compensation agreement, put in whatever you want to be compensated, and sign it and send it over to the seller, the listing agent. The other caveat in using the offer to purchase way of getting compensation, though, is that you have to have buyer agency. So some of these are the slides I stole from Steph's presentation because they were so good, but I did condense them down. So this is, as I said, the ideal scenario. The compensation agreement is being offered. Listing firm and buyer's firm execute a compensation agreement ahead of the offer being accepted. You want to know what you're getting before you send the offer. If it's the case that a compensation agreement is not executed, yes, you can start one. If the seller offers a compensation that is lower than what the buyer and their firm have agreed to on their buyer agency agreement, may the buyer ask for the difference. So say the seller is offering 2.2%. The buyer agency agreement says 2.4. The buyer agent can ask for the 0.4 additionally in the offer. Or
Hey, you're so cute.
he
You're
can
so cute.
2%.
Hi, hi, hi,
No, who needs to be
hi.
muted. Okay. So the key point of that is that the buyer agency agreement compensation and the compensation offered to the buyer's agent have to match. They cannot accept more than what's in the buyer agency agreement. And if they are not wanting to compensate less, then either the buyer pays that difference or you can ask the seller to up it. These are, if you're using the
Hold on, give me 1 second.
actual transaction dependent, ask the listing for a preference. What would you rather use, the offer, or do you have a compensation agreement? Does the total amount compensated from the listing
I
agent
got her.
match what's in the buyer's agent? As I said, they have to match. You either amend the buyer agency agreement or ask for the difference from your buyer, or ask for the difference from the seller again. Remember that it could be the case that no compensation or concessions are offered. And it goes back to your buyers then. It's already in the contract. They have committed to that. And that's part of your buyer consultation at the beginning. You have to explain that they do need to compensate you if they are not, if you are not being compensated by the seller or the listing firm. So good. Amending the listing contract, if that's going to be crash printed in the offers, that's perfect, because that's a lot of hoopla to amend the listing contract. And then you supply the agency agreements to the title company and be hyper vigilant in looking over your closing statements, making sure that that is pulling from where it's supposed to pull. Good communication with the listing agent is necessary always, but more so as we all get used to this situation.
Joni, I'd like to just remind the group too that we're in a period of time where this is a change for everybody. Mortgage companies, title companies, appraisers, everybody. And it's our duty to ensure that if compensation is on the closing statement, that you are, again, inspecting what you expect. The people make mistakes in drafting documents often, and that's okay. People make mistakes. And yet our fiduciary responsibility to our clients and then ensuring that we are paid appropriately at the end falls on the responsibility of the agent to cross their T's and dot their I's. And we've had, not really since the change, but in years past, we've had scenarios where situations of mistakes have been made on closing statements across all title companies, and then the agents get emotionally react in certain ways. And my first question is, did you review the closing statement before you went to closing? And they're like, no, why would I ever do that? And I'm like, well, why wouldn't you ever do that? So it's just a good reminder to be hyper vigilant right now during periods of change, to not always trust that everyone is aware as to what's going on, and that we're inspecting what we expect.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely is all I can say. The compensation agreement, this is a clip from the page where you put in the 2.4 if you're willing to accept 2 or whatever. Whatever the seller is going to do. I said ideally the seller fills this out and gets it to the buyer's agent before writing the offer or before getting an accepted offer. We also put in what is considered earned. Your commission compensation is earned if the drafted offer successfully closes and has procuring cause. Those were the reasons that we came up with, as making it sure that you have earned your commission. It has to close and you have to have the right to accept that compensation. Next one, these are the lines in the offer to purchase. Both of them are asking for your compensation. One is firm to firm, and that is the compensation agreement. The other is seller to buyer, in a sense. Seller agrees to. So in the offer to purchase, the seller agrees to pay the buyer's firm the amount of, and then you put in that small dash, toward the buyer brokerage fees at closing. Payment may be made under this provision, represents an economic adjustment only, and does not create an agency relationship between the buyer's firm and the seller. And I added this final line down here, you must have buyer agency to use this offer to purchase request for compensation. The buyer must be a client of the firm. So if you are working with a buyer, which I don't think many people do anymore, as a customer, you are risking not being paid at all because you don't have the backup of your buyer paying you. And if the seller or the listing firm are not going to pay you, you're toast. And you can't work for free according to your license law. Any questions? And then somebody said this and I loved it. No suspenders and a belt. And that's what the compensation agreement is, and using the offer to purchase. Don't use them both, one or the other. Steph put in here, best practice is to amend the listing contract specific to the offer so that in case the deal falls apart, it doesn't change the actual listing agreement. That's just saying if you have to amend the buyer agency agreement to match this, what the seller is paying, make it specific, amend it and make it specific just to that address. So it still leaves your original buyer agency agreement intact at 2.4 or whatever you're putting in there. But
Perfect.
don't wear suspenders and a belt.
That would be a fashion faux pas.
There.
So I appreciate the dialogue, and it seems like we're hammering this home, and I think we're coming to a point where people are starting to understand the flow chart of how compensation is being directed. So Sheriff Reed, thank you for your time, and thanks for always jumping in to help support our group.
Thank you. Have a good day.
All right, I'm going to fly through training and education. Just a quick update. Here's the August training calendar. Handful of things to point out. August is coming to a close and there's no team meeting next week. So that means we're rolling into September. A couple things to point out to the group. The new 8:30 a.m. new normal conversations are going to continue next week. As we've done Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Next week, it's going to be Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then rolling into September, we're going to go Monday, Thursday, Monday, Thursday, Monday, Thursday. There's still, even yesterday, there were 80 plus people on the call, a ton of engagement and dialogue. Love hearing people's objections. Love how people are articulating the changes that are happening within our industry and learning about doing so. And so we're going to make one adjustment to that, just being that it's Monday and Thursday moving forward into September. And then we'll evaluate kind of where the group is and where the group wants to go with those conversations heading into October. One other thing to point out is on the 18th, Maureen and Friends guest is Alex Brando. Alex is a luxury agent in the Nashville marketplace. So Alex has agreed to jump on and support our community by having a dialogue very similarly to what we had with Aaron Mandel about 2 weeks ago around a conversation around what he's seeing in the Nashville market, how he's built his business and his approach to his business, specifically within the luxury market space in Nashville, Tennessee. So take a look for that on the 18th. All right. To discuss navigating the new normal and the conversations we're having in the mornings on 8:30 a.m. Stay tuned there. Also, handling conversations and objection script practice on Mondays and Thursdays with Jeff Nevin via Zoom. This really is going into more objections, not so much around what are you seeing, what are you hearing? He's going directly into how are we script practicing and role play, and he's a great person to learn from in that regard and realm. Next up, exactly what to say to demonstrate your value to buyers and get paid what you're worth with Phil Jones. Phil Jones is an incredible speaker. This is happening this week, Wednesday at 12 p.m. in all offices. We will be streaming this conversation. So if you're interested, feel free to jump in to the conversation there on Wednesday, the 28th. All right, you ready for it? I have your MegaCamp macroeconomic update. I will break this down for you in the most layman's terms possible. I didn't include every slide, and I tried to have visuals to help you break down as to what you're looking at along the way. All of the slides from today's team meeting will be available to everyone on kwrealtymke.com, along with my notes or what you see in yellow from the conversation as a breakdown to what it is. So let's jump into it. First of all, two commentary. One, school is never truly out for a true professional. True professionals are always learning. They're always learning how to adapt, and they're learning where they are and where they need to go. The second is around discipline. And discipline is the key in order for the ability to get what you want when you want it. Without discipline, you will continue to ride a business that's on a roller coaster. with discipline, you can live a life of intentionality and purpose in order to get what you want when you want it. So the US economy, where are we and where we're headed? First of all, from a GDP, gross domestic product, and on an annualized basis. Okay, GDP is what people are spending on goods and services. The goal across our, let's just say government, is a 2% growth on an annualized basis. 2.5% growth is incredibly strong. Anything above 3 is we're spending too much, which forces prices up, which drives inflation up. We were living with the inflationary period of where we were because of what we came out of in 2020 and what skyrocketed in 2021 because the printing press of the amount of money and cash flow that was flooding into the market post-COVID. Okay. Then we had a bit of a market correction in 2022. Quite frankly, a lot of the measures that you saw were being pulled was to try and get it right around 2%. And the correction isn't so much of a correction, is more of stabilizing the economy. Then in 23 and 24, it was still incredibly strong, projecting this year still being at about 2.5% means looking back, and again, GDP is a lag metric. Looking back, we've been an incredibly strong and healthy economy for the last 2 years. Now, let's take a look at recession probability. And what you'll see down here is the orange lines is the New York Federal Reserve recession probability, okay? And the recession probability, then what you see here in the gray boxes is when a recession occurred going back to the 1970s. So if you look here, there was a high probability, you notice that a recession occurred. High probability, recession occurred. High probability, high probability, high probability, high probability, high probability. And you can see the impacts of where the probability curve lies and where the economic recessions occurred. We are at the highest point we've had in terms of probability of a recession since the 1980s. And the commentary to that was, so what? You need a recession in order to have a boom. Look at it from the standpoint of you need to have a recession in order to have a boom. So what? We aren't there yet. Yet there are some leading indicators that we need to be paying attention to. GDP on a quarterly basis, here was the thing. The problem is you don't know you're in a recession because a recession is defined by you have to be in it for 2 consecutive quarters, which is 6 months before they will acknowledge it. Don't get it twisted. Housing has been in a recession. Okay, and the housing is the leading indicator for a macro recession of what's to come. Okay, so what causes some of these metrics? One of them, unemployment on an annualized basis. Anything below 4% is gainfully employed. If you look at this on an annualized basis, we've been in a very much gainfully employed economy for the last 2 years, in 2022 and 2023. However, when you zoom in as to where we are in 2024, we've seen an upward trend of unemployment starting since the summer of 2023. So the big question is the upward trend that we've seen since July of 2023 indicative to a recession or returning to the new normal as to where unemployment will be lying? There's some uncertainty there, okay? Because it's not like what happened in 2020 where there was a huge spike and then a huge drop. It's naturally been rising, and they're trying to determine, is that leading to a recession? Is it indicative to a recession, or is it returning to a new normal? Now, unemployment as it relates to jobs that are available and those that are seeking employment is this. Something to point out is the jobs opening is the yellow line, the unemployment. And unemployment, for you guys to understand, is defined as basically people who are actively seeking employment but are not currently employed. You have to actively be seeking. And so what happened is coming out of 21, 22, there was a huge boom of jobs because people were spending money like crazy. Companies were hiring labor in order to keep up with the upkeep of spending within the economy in order to try and take advantage of the opportunity of the way spending had occurred. And we kind of talked about earlier with GDP. And there was this huge delta between jobs that were available and those that were actively seeking employment, which is what you see right here within this period of time. And so what happened was the economy was an inferno and inflation skyrocketed. Now what you're seeing is a bit more of a divergent path where employment numbers of of people who are actively looking to hire has come down pretty significantly, and we're almost on the verge of an access point where those seeking an employment there might be more people in the near future seeking employment than jobs that are available. A big leading indicator of when a recession would occur. Okay. Now, inflation on an annualized basis. Inflation is basically the cost of the items. Do I have a job? Do I have money? And what am I paying for those things? Couple things to point out here is you can see the trend line as to where inflation has come down based on some of the Federal Reserve policy to try and get that under control. And you can see the direction that that has taken over the last specifically 2 to 4 years, most importantly. When you look at it in terms of inflation with items with falling prices in 2024, here's where you can see the products and services that have had the largest deflation, where prices are falling within the economy. One being smartphones, used cars and trucks. There was a period of time where used cars and trucks were astronomically high, toys, television, airfare, furniture and bedding, health insurance, so on and so forth. Inflation with the fastest rising prices is motor vehicle insurance, admission to sporting events, healthcare at home, photographic equipment, admission to movies, concerts, sporting events, again, entertainment, hospital services, so on and so forth. Now, that's just kind of a macro update as to where the economy is. Now, that's setting the stage because we'll present to you 3 scenarios of what will happen. Now let's take a look at housing, because housing is the leading indicator within our economy. First of all, home sales on an annualized basis. If you look in 2023, we had 4.1 million transactional units across the US. In 2024, right now, we're on pace because of what happened in the first and second quarter to be at 4.2 million. However, when you look into June, and I talked about this a lot at the beginning of July, June had a bit of a corrective measure based on the seasonality to it. Typically, June is the highest transactional unit month in a given year. That wasn't necessarily the case so far in 2024. So what you're seeing here is the projected annualized transactional units that happened in June. Right now, it was at 4.2, has now the indicators have come down slightly to 3.89 transactional units after June. Now, I will tell you, July did bump back a little bit, so stay tuned there. The message is this: housing is already in a recession. I mentioned that earlier. It's a leading indicator of a recession is housing because it leads the economy. Now, home sales on a monthly basis, in going back to or staying on a similar conversation, is the challenge is we are no longer keeping pace with last year. So unless something changes, we are sliding backwards. And if you remember in December and January of this last year and this year, my commentary was, look, if the market is flat, we should be excited. If the market is up single digits, we should be ecstatic, because the prediction was that we had kind of hit the bottom. Now, based on where June was, it means we're actually sliding backwards on an annualized basis. The one major course correction is if we see continued major rate changes in Q4. And that could be the one thing that really elevates the housing inventory in the housing market again in 2024. Stay tuned. We've seen a bit of corrective measures in terms of the rates based on what happened in the capital markets about 3 to 4 weeks ago. Home prices in terms of appreciation in 2024 across the US, home prices are expected to appreciate on a plus 7%. The historical average, which is the blue line, which goes back to the long-term trend of what their target is plus 4%. So we're still seeing the US housing inventory appreciate roughly about 50% higher than the historical trend at a plus 7%. The other commentary that was made to this that would help with affordability is housing inventory and affordability alleviation is a local level solution driver, not a federal government responsibility. So as we think about what is going to lead to some of the alleviation of the inventory issues we've had, they're more local than they are macro, right? They're more local government control. Inventory on a monthly basis, this is some interesting commentary, okay? In 1980 to 2018, we only had 4 months below 4 months of supply of inventory. Since 2018, we've only averaged 3 months of supply. We've only averaged 3 months. So is this new normal? Unsure. We have to zoom out for perspective. Okay. Basically saying from 1980 to 2018, we only had 4 months. So that's roughly 30 years. We only had 4 months below 4 months of inventory. Since 2018, we've only averaged 3 months. And so the question is there going to be an inventory alleviation in the future? Is there not? Unsure. And we have to understand as to what that looks like. When you look at rates on an annualized basis, perspective is important, even though people don't want to hear it. Okay. And I'll help break this down because I think this is a really important slide when you're discussing your buyer consultations. Is this, when you look at it, the annual mortgage rate on a per year basis is the blue line. The historical average from 72 to 23 is what you see here, 7.74%. So since 1972 to 2023, the historical average between that period is 7.74%. If you zoom in a little closer, the historical average from 1990 to 2023 is 5.98%. As it stands right now, we're sitting right around 6.7%. So we're right within the realm of the averages between 1972 to 2023 and 1990 to 2023. Again, perspective within the rate environment is incredibly important to make sure that we're educating our buyers, because what we had experienced 3, 4, 5 years ago was a complete unicorn of an anomaly. Okay. Now, mortgage rates on a monthly basis, rates have come down 70 basis points from last year. Again, positive news for our industry. When it comes to affordability in terms of where rates are and where everything sits in terms of where price appreciations are, affordability is a concern because it is one of the most expensive times to buy a home, but it has been more expensive. What do I mean? Let's take a look. When you look at principal and interest as a percentage of income, what you can see is the orange line, okay? And then what you see on the blue line is the historical average from 72 to 2023. And the purple line is the historical average from 2000 to 2024. And again, this is where perspective is important because people are always asking, am I buying at the top of the market? Am I buying at the top of the market? So in 1981, the average consumer had 49% of their income was going to their principal and interest. In 2006, 32% of their income went to their principal and interest. Okay. And in 2024, we're sitting around 35% of people's incomes are going towards their principal and interest. Point being is it expensive? Yes, but it has been historically more expensive to buy a home. So let's dive a little bit deeper into that dialogue. One, home prices, when you look at it in terms of where things have come and where things have gone, I'm going back to the annual appreciation rate, is it's always a great time to buy. Why? Because time in the market beats timing the market. Okay. It's compounding interest. It's that whole theory of compounding interest. Values have always appreciated over time. And remember, the hold period right now is anywhere between 5 to 8 years for any consumer. Every market has always corrected itself within a 5 to 8 year window, where when they bought within a 5 to 8 year window to when they sell, prices have always corrected and they've always gone up over time. So a real great line that they shared from stage at MegaCamp was this: you might buy at the top of the moment, but you will never buy at the top of the market because the market always rises. I'll repeat that. You might buy at the top of the moment, but you will never buy at the top of the market because the market always rises over time. Time in the market beats timing the market. Now, how does this impact you and how does this impact our industry? Here was the message. If you survive, you can advance. If you survived, you can advance. A ton of people got out of the industry in the last 12 months. If you're still sitting here, it means you survived and advanced. You're not in it for a great year. You're in it to build a great career. Historically, we've seen roughly about 10 sides per agent across the US. Okay. Last year, we saw about 5.6 units closed per agent. So down roughly about 40% versus historical averages. Again, survive and advance. You're in it to have a great career, not just a great year. Continue to play the game, the infinite game. When you look at it though, where this is where the positivity of where sides per agent may go down, this is why we always say agents control their units, the market gives you volume, is this. Market volume per agent in 2024 on a projected basis is on pace to be the third best in history because of the appreciation gains. Okay? Focus on converting units and volume will come. We are projected to have the third best close volume per agent in history. If you focus on converting your units, volume will come. Now, where's the opportunity? 76% of mortgages have rates 5% or less. We've talked about this before. So where does this show up? 38% of all homeowners across the US right now own their home outright. 38% own their homes with more than 50% equity. And 24% of homeowners own homes with less than 50% equity. So 76% of homeowners have at least 50% of equity in their homes. There's lots of things they can do with that equity if they need to access their capital, and it is still a good time to sell, right? So based on the economics of what's going on within our GDP and what's going on within our housing inventory, what are three scenarios that could play out? First, the most likely scenario, well, not the most likely, but just scenario one is there's no recession. Okay, unemployment will stay below 5%, rates will fall to around 6%, and we'll see around 4.5 million homes sold in 2024. This scenario will be defined by a resilient labor market, which allows rates to be decreased before a recession sets in. The decline in rates will result in more home sales, but the recovery will slow in housing as rates take time to come down. The advice: need to have meaningful dialogue with clients on where rates would need to be in order to make them jump. You need to maintain close relationships. I talked about the last mile problem. You need to maintain close relationships so you have a pulse on their situation. Otherwise, somebody else will. Adjust your sales before the wind hits. Okay? Scenario two is a normal recession. Unemployment continues to spike. It will level off around 6 to 8%. Interest rates will fall rapidly to a 5 to 6% range, and we'll see home sales at around 5 million. Historically, falling home sales lead us into recessions and rising sales lead us out. Okay, that's important. You always have to have a recession before a boom. After 3 years of declines, the transition into a recession would trigger a more aggressive drop in rates from the Federal Reserve and stimulate the housing market and drive growth of an economic recovery. Now, scenario three, a banking recession. This would be the worst case scenario. Unemployment spikes to around 10%, rates would fall to 3 to 4%. We would see home sales at 4 million or less because we would see an incredible spike in unemployment. In this scenario, something damages the banking system, creating a shock to lending. Home prices and home sales will fall despite low mortgage rates. This happened in the Great Recession and savings and loans crisis. Now, this isn't what they're predicting to happen, but it's just understanding that there's three scenarios that could play out. And again, the reason why I led with the last mile problem last week is I go back to the advice that I think is incredibly appropriate despite whatever scenario shows up, is you need to maintain close relationships to have a pulse on your client's situation. Otherwise, somebody else will. And you have to understand what their situation is that would cause them to jump. And again, I remind you, 72% of people only interview one agent, 92% of the time, they only interview two people. So, do you have a pulse on your client's situation in order to navigate whichever three of the scenarios play out in the next 6 to 12 months? And I will leave you with this in terms of the macro update. The methods of home purchase, and I think this is an incredibly important reminder. In 2023, 89% of all residential transactions had a licensed professional that helped them navigate their transaction. It was the highest it's been in 40 plus years, and transactions are getting more complex, not less, and people are showing you they value the services you provide. Don't forget that. Be resilient to whichever scenario shows up. We'll help you navigate it. And I will leave you with a great reminder that I've played before. And it's around the concept of good from my good friend, Jocko.
One of my direct subordinates, one of my guys that worked for me, he would call me up or pull me aside with some major problem, some issue that was going on. And he'd say, boss, we got this and that, and the other thing. And I look at him and I'd say, good. And finally, one day he was telling me about some issue that he was having, some problem, and he said, I already know what you're gonna say. And I said, well, what am I gonna say? He said, you're gonna say good. He said, that's what you always say. When something is wrong and going bad, you always just look at me and say, good. And I said, well, yeah, when things are going bad, there's gonna be some good that's gonna come from it. Didn't get the new high-speed gear we wanted? Good. Didn't get promoted? Good. What time do you get better? Oh, mission got canceled? Good. You can focus on that. Didn't get funded. Didn't get the job you wanted. Got injured. Sprained my ankle. Got tapped out? Good. Got beat? Good. Learned. Unexpected problems? Good. You have the opportunity to figure out a solution. That's it. When things are going bad, don't get all bummed out, don't get startled, don't get frustrated. If you can say the word good, guess what? It means you're still alive. It means you're still breathing. And if you're still breathing, well, now you still got some fight left in you. So get up, dust off, reload, recalibrate, re-engage, and go out on the attack.
So there you are.
You know, Trump will sign the national abortion ban if he gets the chance.
Sorry. There you go. Every opportunity provides you ways to find solutions. And with a lot of the change and a lot of the uncertainty and everything else that's going on, talks of a recession, all these other things, it's your disciplined approach is how you navigate it to find solutions for you, your family, and your clients is what you will see through it. Because every recession, every industry change, everything that comes out of it is always opportunity. So with that, guys, have a great day. Thanks for showing up.